Hello, you're with IndiaPostLive.com, India's first live conversation web television. Well, Narendra Modi's inviting the heads of SAARC countries to his swearing-in ceremony was touted by many as a masterstroke. But what next as far as India's foreign policy is concerned under the new regime? Take a look.
Just when everyone thought that India's Prime Minister would be in a hurry to take oath, he seems to have taken his own time. Not just that, he stumped everyone by inviting heads of state of neighboring countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh for his swearing-in. That India will have a proactive foreign policy under the new Prime Minister is a given. But what are going to be his focus areas? Modi has chosen to reach out to countries under SAARC to send the message of regional cooperation being topmost on his agenda. But he will also focus on China and Japan, as they are key to his scheme of things. Modi has been in regular touch with them for the past decade, and he believes togetherness and support of regional countries are key to India increasing its authority as a global player.
All right, so India increasing its authority as a global player. Well, we are going to talk about that in this conversation. I would invite all of you to join in on this conversation with your video and audio comments, your posts and your tweets. www.indiapostlive.com. All you have to do is send us a participation request and we would be very happy to listen to, hear in and watch you as you speak out your thoughts to us on the portal. Also, please tweet us, #IndiaPostLive and @India Post Live. For now, joining me in this conversation, I have Nilova Roy Chaudhary. She is the chief editor of Symbiosis IRGA, that's the Indian Review of Global Affairs. And joining me on Google Hangout is Jahazeb Hussain. He joins us from Vancouver, and Jahazeb is the editor of the magazine Collateral Damage. Jahazeb, thank you so much. Welcome to the conversation. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good.
Great. All right. Nilova, thank you so much for joining the conversation. It's a pleasure to have you. Let me first start by asking you, this masterstroke, as it is being touted by many, inviting the SAARC leaders, it was the first time that they were here. And in the morning, Hamid Karzai had a meeting with the new Prime Minister of India. What do you think happens next? What kind of pragmatism do we see on the ground as far as India's foreign policy is concerned?
I think his choice of somebody like Sushma Swaraj has been a good choice because she has been leader of the opposition and as a result has been in touch with a lot of these people. She's personally met a lot of them.
Right.
He is very new to foreign policy in terms of, his experience.
Yes.
So this idea of inviting all of these people, while it's been a grand gesture, it also needs obviously substantive following up. The major crisis that we face, and part of the reason that he called in the SAARC leaders is because obviously your major interests lie in the neighborhood in which you live. I mean, there's no getting out of this. So obviously you require the sort of collaboration, cooperation of all of those concerned. The major security problems that we face also emanate out of our neighborhood, which is part of the reason why he called these people. And as you saw just the day, just on Friday, was it that there was this massive attack on the consulate in Herat?
Herat, yes.
So terrorism is obviously going to be a very, very, very key focus of the Modi prime ministership.
Right.
Having said that, the meetings with Afghanistan's president this morning centered on that attack in Herat. He is likely to be meeting Nawaz Sharif now in the next couple of minutes, I believe. And again, I am sure the idea will be to try and revive a sort of a sustained dialogue. I mean, Pakistan wants something that is unstoppable and unbreakable, as it were. They want something that can be sustained whatever the circumstances. As far as Mr. Modi is concerned, given the kind of hawkish positions he has taken in the past, it will be he'll have to make an extra effort to try and allay the sort of worries that the others have in terms of what his positions are likely to be.
Right.
I mean, you can't just say somebody will cannot kill our soldiers on the LOC and get away with it. Define what you mean by something like that, because we're talking 21st century world circumstances. You cannot just threaten another country. These are other sovereign countries. So this is a basic thing about his foreign policy, I think, is going to be getting the economy in order.
Right.
Once the economy gets in place and is sort of growing and thriving, you will find everybody flocking to you. You will not really need to necessarily make that extra effort.
Jahanzeb, let me talk to you now. You remember on Friday, when we were having a conversation on Narendra Modi's invitation to Nawaz Sharif, and it was the very same day that the Indian consulate was attacked in Herat. We were talking about, how all of us we seem to arrive at a consensus that they must meet. Now the meeting is about to happen. What do you see emerging out of this meeting? Because remember, as Nilova just pointed out, Mr. Modi has been very hawkish in his election campaigns as far as Pakistan is concerned, and he talked of the beheading of the Jawan, and he said, how can we engage in dialogue with them? And the moment he becomes Prime Minister, he invites Nawaz Sharif. Where do you see these talks going?
Well, I think that nationalist rhetoric for both countries is for internal purposes and not necessarily for concrete foreign policy actions.
Right.
For internal management of the
Jahanzeb, the video is... hello? Can you hear me, Jahanzeb? Okay, I think that we seem to have a slight problem there with his video. We are also... All right. I think we're trying to get Jahanzeb back and then he will be talking to us. Okay, he said that this kind of rhetoric is for internal purposes only, and when it comes to the larger issue, you kind of bury all these talks and then you get down to talking.
Yeah, well, that is what statesmanship is generally about.
Yes,
but
diplomacy.
The fact of the matter is, if you raise the bar as high as you have raised it, it becomes somewhat difficult to sort of backtrack. You've been at this constant focus of trying to ensure that Pakistan acts on, bringing to justice the people who were responsible for 26/11. And we've sort of tried to make that a precondition in these talks. Now, for things to be back to normal, there has to be a modicum of verification of all these declarations that they keep making, right? Now, I am all for talks, because other than talks and engaging with each other, there is no way out.
Do you think that India and Pakistan should start, as it were, maybe not from scratch, but maybe from the composite dialogue that was initiated in 1997?
I am not entirely sure of the format. The composite dialogue was sort of going along on every track. I don't see any great progress having been made in the last 10 years. I mean, it took off in a sustained way in 2004 after Vajpayeeji's Islamabad visit. But I haven't seen a great deal of progress in terms of what has actually been achieved. The so-called low-hanging fruit that everyone talks about in terms of the trade, most favored nation treaty from Pakistan, things like
that
settling Sir Creek. I mean, these are actually fairly achievable. Why they are not being done is another matter, because there is an element of hawkishness in the establishments. It's not just that they're doing this for their domestic consumption.
Because Pakistan also has a dichotomy in terms of the army stand vis-a-vis the elected government stand.
Majorly, because, I mean, just an example is the fact that Mr. Nawaz Sharif took 2.5, almost 3 days to respond to this invitation. The fact
there
that
was opposition from
there was
within.
major opposition, and he had to get everyone on board.
Yes.
He's trying. I mean, this is a man who's been deposed twice by the army. Obviously, he's trying his hardest to get the army under some species of civilian control.
I think we have Jahanzeb back. Sorry, Jahanzeb. Hi. Sorry, we lost you there, but please continue with what you were saying. We were just talking about.
I was saying that nationalist rhetoric in both countries seems to be primarily for internal consumption and internal ideological management of the states.
Right.
I do not see how completely those nationalist rhetorics could be applied against each other in terms of relations between India and Pakistan. So I think I'm not surprised that Nawaz Sharif accepted the invitation to go to Delhi. Nawaz Sharif was also close to Vajpayee before he was disposed. And in fact, Nawaz Sharif told Hindustan Times today that he is in Delhi to resume where he left off with Vajpayee. And he said that I am backed by business and I support business, so does Modi. And
Do you see Pakistan giving the MFN status to India?
At this point of time, probably yes.
Do you see that happening, Jahazib?
I don't think Nawaz Sharif would mind doing that, but I think the decision at the end of the day lies with the army. And at this point, there is no indication that the army would necessarily allow that. So I mean, it should be. I mean, we would need to wait and see if that happens. But personally, Nawaz Sharif and the sectors of the society, especially the business establishment that backs him,
Yes.
would want better relations with India.
Right.
But have to see if the army allows that or not.
Right. Jahazib, yeah.
I think, Jahazib, the point you were making about these, the rhetoric being for domestic consumption, you've sort of slightly contradicted what you're saying in terms of what, you said subsequently, in terms of the fact that the army still does control India policy. So, whatever rhetoric there might have been, the fact of the matter is that it is still the Pakistan army which controls the policy vis-a-vis India. So as much as Mr. Nawaz Sharif might try, and he's taken a huge personal risk and a personal gesture of boldness, in fact, I'd say, to come to India. The fact of the matter is that he still is obviously a very worried man. He has to constantly look behind his shoulders, which is not something necessarily that Mr. Modi has to do at this point of time.
Yeah, that's true. That's because of the imbalance between the army and the civilian establishment in Pakistan.
Exactly. So that's the nature of that state.
Yeah, that even if you look at the 1990s, on one hand, Nawaz Sharif and Vajpayee wanted to improve relations, but at the same time, they were both having nuclear tests at the same time, right? So I mean, those kind of things.
No, I don't think the nuclear tests were necessarily. I think the nuclear tests were a point that the BJP establishment was trying to prove. No, I think that it was not meant to be necessarily tit for tat. That's my view. I personally feel.
Let me Nilova and Jahazib, let me quickly bring in another guest who is joining us online. In fact, from Chennai, Kirti Jayakumar. Kirti Jayakumar is the founder of the Building Peace Project. Kirti, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Welcome to IndiaPostLive.com.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Kirti. First of all, you have been, I think, listening to the conversation from the beginning. Let me quickly ask you, there are so many outstanding issues. 2611. India wants answers. India is looking for answers. The Sir Creek issue, which Mr. Narendra Modi himself has brought up a couple of times, and of course the K issue, the Kashmir issue. All right, where do you see that going now? Where do you see the relations between the two countries headed, especially in these issues after this the meeting that is in fact happening as we speak between the two heads of states?
I think to start with, it's extremely important that we understand these issues as they exist, and we understand that it's no longer in anyone's interest to sweep them under the carpet. For 60 odd years, we've just been doing that. We've either had these talks that go nowhere, or we've had talks that have ended up with promises being made with nothing being followed up. So I think it's high time we put all of that aside. And to start with, I understand what Jahangir said about how the domestic rhetoric is exclusively for the domestic soil and doesn't extend beyond that realm. But I think we need to understand that a lot of the domestic influences will goad these two leaders in their conversations with one another.
Yes.
So that's something that has to play a very significant role. It's what the people ultimately want out of their leaders to do. So I think right now it would probably be idealistic to wish that they start from scratch. But I think that's where we need to set aside our differences, our ideological differences, because Mr. Modi is not Mr. Modi, Mr. Sharif is not Mr. Sharif. They are India and Pakistan. And they need to treat the dialogue that's being brought to the table like that. It's no longer about what each one's image is going to be out there in the media. I think it's high time we learn to accept that our leaders are representing us and expect that out of our leaders. So I think it's important to start the dialogue at some point. It's no longer useful to sweep it under the carpet.
Fair enough. I mean, certainly they need to engage and they must engage. There's no option but, as I mentioned earlier. But the fact remains that we, as India, have been a phenomenally defensive country right from day one. I mean, when people talk about the K word, let's get real here. What are we talking about as far as Kashmir goes, right? We are talking about it being the sort of ethos of what India is and everything that was opposed to this two-nation theory. So for India to give away Kashmir or the valley, which is basically what Pakistan essentially wants. I mean, I'm just getting down to absolute brass tacks. There's no hedging about this. They want the valley because that is the slightly Muslim majority area in all of Jammu and Kashmir.
Right.
If you go across the rest of Jammu and Kashmir, you know, there are Shias in Ladakh, and so the whole composition of the state of Jammu and Kashmir is something that is fairly diverse, diffused, and
yes.
It is this K word that we seem to be terrified about. I do not understand why. You know, the Indian foreign policy decision making has been so defensive for the past 67, odd years. Because what does the UN resolution say, and why do we, the UN resolution says that the status quo ante as on August the 15th, 1947 has got to be put in place before any plebiscite takes place. This is what the UN resolution says. Now, we are always terrified of this term plebiscite, but there are certain preconditions that Pakistan itself has got to meet to take on this particular plebiscite issue. They have got to vacate the portion, Gilgit, Baltistan, all of these northern areas, what is now called Pakistan occupied Kashmir, has got to be vacated. I mean, they keep harping on the UN resolutions. And this is something that we have tried to sort of counter and say, the line of control as it exists today exists. You are not going to be able to snatch each other's territories. So get real and abide by this particular line of control as being the fixed border between these two countries.
Can I just interject and ask you one question?
Certainly.
Is it too early to say that the hardline stance that Narendra Modi has been feared to be taking with his, with the border countries, is it too early to say whether they're misplaced?
The hardline stance?
Yeah.
I think there's a great deal of difference between being in the opposition and between coming to power.
Right.
When you assume power, you realize a lot of the realities that you cannot really skirt around.
Right.
When in opposition, it's the easiest thing in the world to be critical of every single thing that's done.
Right.
So today he has to realize the realities as they exist on the ground. He cannot circumvent them. So you have to face the fact that Pakistan is there. This part of Pakistan occupied Kashmir is there. There's no point saying ki, this is what whatever great Rajya, there are parliament resolutions. This is not going to work. This is unrealistic. So accept what there is and move on from there. Till such time as that happens, it's not going to happen.
Jahazeb, can I get your comments on that? Because, I would also like to move to some other countries, like Bangladesh, like China, like Nepal. Can we just have very quickly your comments on Pakistan, and then we will move to other countries of South Asia?
Yes, just another comment on Kashmir. I think I agree with what the speaker was saying, that you cannot just keep on talking about the UN resolution and whatever the wording of the statement was at that time. I think the boundaries are there, and Pakistan and India should work together to ensure the safety of the region and accept the line as it is, and work towards creating, let's say, a free trade zone or something, at least demilitarize it, so that conflict is potentially comes from there. So yeah, I agree with that point.
All right. Of course, the Kashmir issue is something that we can converse for hours and hours together. I would also like to inform all our viewers and also my guests that Meher Tarar was supposed to join us. She had, in fact, she was coming online, but she has suddenly, been taken ill. She is unwell, and she has promised to join us on some other day. So, of course, the conversation will continue then as well. And the conversation continues on IndiaPostLive.com with your audio, video comments, your tweets. And in fact, Jahanzeb and Kirti, let me tell you that we have a video comment, in fact, from Bhutan. Let's quickly listen into what somebody from Bhutan has told us about her expectations of India's foreign policy.
Bhutan will expect Mr. Modi to help Bhutan in terms of business and economic development activity. Bhutan has remained like very sluggish when it comes to economic development and development activities.
All right, so there we had Dawa Gelmo from Bhutan telling us her expectations. Let us quickly go to the Bangladesh issue.
I'd just like to make a comment
sure,
on the
sure, sure.
Bhutan
Absolutely,
issue as well.
absolutely,
The
yeah.
point is, Bhutan is somewhat unique in terms of the fact that industry is not really encouraged. It is the last Shangri-La in terms of keeping their environment
Yes.
pristine.
Yes.
Now, for any greater development issues to take place, I mean, okay, hydroelectric power is a great thing which they're doing, and with as far as India is concerned and Bhutan, it's a win-win situation. But without some species of industry and manufacturing and so on, development will continue to remain sluggish. But I think Bhutan has done relatively well in the past couple of years. They're opening up very gradually. I think that is a model that their monarchy and their parliament has sort of decided upon. It's not that the economy has been sluggish for reasons outside of their borders, so that is something that they would have to resolve, not really necessarily India. And now moving on to Bangladesh.
Oh,
sorry.
Bangladesh. Yeah, let me quickly try and get in Kirti's comments on Bangladesh. There have been several contentious issues, Kirti. The Tista agreement, and in fact, the last time that the Dr. Manmohan Singh had visited, Mamta Banerjee created a hurdle, and various agreements could not be signed. Where do you see India and Bangladesh moving forward? Despite the fact that Mamta Banerjee, we were just in fact discussing a few days back, that is, despite the fact that Mamta Banerjee has 34 MPs, the fact, is she going to be toothless? Is she going to at all have a say in Indo-Bangla relations now?
Well, to start with, I think, as far as my understanding of India's relationship with Bangladesh is concerned, Bangladesh hasn't really figured in one of most India's priorities. So I think
Which
right
is
now,
sad, which is
Which is
very
sad.
sad because it's the largest boundary we have. This is the point, proximity to Delhi. This is something, of course, that all the Bengalis will always crib about.
Yes.
But it is a fact that it's a sad situation and a reflection on an entire part of our country, the northeast.
And also the immigration issue, which Mr. Modi brought up in his campaigns in Assam.
Sorry, Kirti, go on.
Kirti, please continue.
Sure. So I think Bangladesh is in a place where, as citizens, the people don't really have much power. So I think India needs to look at that angle first and ensure that we allow their people to get the chance to speak their mind and ensure their rights first. And then in the process, we need to understand that development is the pivoting angle, because I think Mr. Modi has proved his prowess on the economy front, and he's really good with that side of things. So I think we need to focus on the people and ensuring that we allow room for diplomatic pressure to ensure that the people get the development that they need. That's what's been eluding the community for years, and I think we should start with that.
Again, I would beg to differ on a couple of issues. I think the nature of the government in Bangladesh has been a very important factor in terms of determining what development takes place. The earlier government, the polity has sort of been divided between the BNP led by Khaleda Zia and the Awami League, which is the party of their independence and the founding, and considered a considerably more secular kind of, a polity. Now, I mean, the BNP was in alliance with the Jamaat Islami, which is generally fairly bad news. So, as far as India is concerned, we need to sort of grab the opportunity that has been provided by the Awami League being in power, because they have enormously improved our security situation on the entire northeast. So what the previous government, the UPA government did was make certain overtures, a very major one of which is power sharing. 500
Yes.
megawatts of power today is going across to Bangladesh, which is a very, very good thing. We're helping out on transport things.
And they gave us
They
access
gave
to their
us
ports,
access
Benapole.
of Benapole petrol.
Benapole,
Yeah, absolutely. But what is very necessary is, they're very emotive people. You require the Teesta agreement. It's also a riverine country. It's an agricultural country primarily. You require agreements like the Teesta Accord, and you require, for the Modi government, BJP has always harped on illegal immigration.
Yes.
You need to ratify the land boundary agreement. This was not a UPA initiative. This was something signed in 1974 between Mujib and Indira Gandhi. And that just needs to be ratified. So if you have fixed borders, obviously the question of illegal immigration is going to decrease hugely.
Yes.
So, these are normal pragmatic measures which I expect Mr. Modi to be able to do. Even the Teesta, I think he doesn't have to take any pressures from regional entities, however well off they might be at this point, and he should go ahead with what is in India's national interest.
Right.
And
So let's see what happens when Mr. Modi actually goes across to Dhaka, and what the kind of rhetoric that goes on between Mamata Banerjee and Mr. That will be very interesting for all of us, I'm
it
sure.
will be very interesting news-wise, but I don't think substantively she can do very much.
Very newsworthy. It's going to make a lot of news, I'm sure. Okay, let's once again go back to Pakistan, please. I hope, Jahanzeb, you were not getting too bored with our talks on Bangladesh. Jahanzeb, in fact, I would like to tell you that we have another video response coming in from Pakistan, and this is from Amir Mughal. He is a security analyst in Pakistan, and let's quickly listen into what he has to say.
Every now and then the jingoists in India often target those who are considered doves in Pakistan and ask questions for which we have no answer, immediate answers. Second thing is that every now and then, whenever a terrorist act takes place in Pakistan or Afghanistan or in India, people would jump gun and blame ISI. I'm not asking for from Mr. Modi to give another Pakistan to Indian Muslim, but cool it down on Indian Muslims. Reconcile. Truth and reconciliation is the only way forward between several communities living in India and Pakistan for better and prosperous future for our future generations.
All right, so we have a security analyst there asking Mr. Modi to cool down on bilateral jingoism. Is that what he said?
That is what I gathered, but I
That's what
wasn't
even I
entirely
gathered.
sure of what exactly he was trying to
Cool
say.
down. What do you think, Jahanzeb? What do you think? Do you have any reaction to what you just heard?
I couldn't hear it very clearly, but if he was saying that Modi should cool down on nationalist rhetoric, yeah, Modi should cool down on that, but also Pakistan has its own duties and tasks. We know about the establishment pressures, we know about the ISI and the army, but another point is that the Pakistani state has created so many fifth columns that it does not have entire control over some of the subcontractors and some of the subcontracted jihadi groups that it uses in India and Afghanistan and internally. So my worry is that if relations between Modi and Nawaz Sharif begin to improve, and some dissident group or groups inside Pakistan might decide to carry out some sort of attack
Right.
in India on their own without explicit approval of the ISI or the army, then what will happen? Because if you remember when Sharaf was in power,
That's a very real
Sharaf
concern. That's a very real concern, Jahanzeb.
In fact, that is
Yeah.
the major
That is-
concern,
yes,
because
exactly.
there has been so many elements with vested
It's
interests.
like we take a step forward and we take two steps back.
No, it's basically because there are such key vested interests within both countries that do not wish to see any kind of rapprochement, for the simple reason that what is then the Pakistani army's raison d'etre for being as huge as it is?
Yes.
Unless you can find a bogey. And at this point of time, obviously, since independence, that bogey country has been India. Now, if suddenly, I mean, it took a hell of a lot for the previous army chief to have actually said that India is not the primary threat. The primary threat we are facing today is from our dissident elements who have gone rogue.
Yes.
No, so clearly, that admission was a very, very major admission for an army chief to have made. Now, this is what they need to take forward, and this is what we need to accept and understand.
Right.
And because, I mean, it is entirely possible that given the vested interests in both countries, somebody is going to want to derail the process.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, so, somebody there will say the Samjhauta Express killings were never probed, we don't have anything on that. Why do you expect such a hurried, set of responses on 26/11?
Right.
So this tit for tat thing can go on endlessly.
Kirti,
there's never anything that
Kirti, let me quickly, we have to wrap up this particular conversation. Of course, it will continue online with your comments. Let me quickly ask you, there is, of course, as both Jahazeb and Nilova pointed out, a trust deficit. There is a major trust deficit which has been going on for decades. We are all talking, the rational thinking individuals, we are saying that, okay, we must talk, but there is a trust deficit. Very quickly, your last comments on the way forward.
I think the way forward is to look at the big picture, because with the troop drawdown in Afghanistan, it's extremely important that we look at our roles as regional players in the peace process. So we need to understand that there are elements like both the speakers have just pointed out, there are elements that are trying to derail the process.
Yes.
But we need to keep ourselves to the path of the process to ensure that we do our part. So at least a foundation is laid, and in the future we can sort of build on it. So it's absolutely imperative to understand our role in the region itself.
Great.
And to see how far we have to take the region. It's no longer about my country and your country, it's about our region and how we can make it one day.
Stability in the region.
And are you aware of the fact that India and Pakistan do not even talk to each other on the issue of Afghanistan? Afghanistan is not even an issue on the plate.
Right.
And
Exactly.
given how
And it
important
should
that
be.
it is.
Both the nations probably need to have bigger hearts. Jahazeb, very quickly, your last comments.
I really hope the two countries could work together on the issues that we have talked about.
Yes.
Though if that would happen remains to be seen. But I mean, one positive point from Pakistan is that the army seems to have changed its doctrine a little bit and has realized that the main threat comes from the Taliban. Though, as was said before, that the raison d'etre of the army is anti-Indianism, and whether that could change, I mean, that's a huge transformation that is required in Pakistan, which would take a long time. The country wouldn't have to reinvent itself practically. But let's hope that with Nawaz Sharif and Modi in power, some little steps could be taken towards a better relationship between the two.
Some little steps could be taken between more stability in the region, I would say. Nilova Roy Chaudhary, very quick comments. Do you think India needs to have, now that, we do consider India to be like the big brother as far as South Asia is concerned. Do you think there should be more giving as far as India is concerned?
Certainly, and the giving can only be in the form of economic cooperation, as far as I can guess.
Yes.
The more stakes you have in each other's countries, the less likelihood there is of something getting derailed in terms of, a stray terrorist incident here or there, or a major terrorist incident. But you need to have that cooperation, and India, obviously, as the biggest entity in this area, must reach out. I mean, there is no question, you cannot but engage with your neighbors.
India must reach out, and of course there is no question that we have to engage with our neighbors. Let's see how a foreign policy under Narendra Modi takes shape, and of course under the new External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining the conversation. I would like to thank Kirti. Kirti, thank you so much. You joined us all the way from Chennai with your insights. Thank you. Jahazeb, of course, all the way from Vancouver. I'm sure it's midnight there. Last time we spoke, we woke you up early in the morning, and now it's late in the night. Thank you so much for your comments, Jahazeb. It's always a pleasure having you in the conversation. Of course, Nilova Roy Chaudhary, your first time on India Post Live. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. The conversation continues through your audio and video comments, your tweets, and your posts. Thank you so much for watching.